with the layers and highlighting for these Night Goblin Archers, and using a wet palette now. I find it just makes it easier to control the paint in terms of the consistency, and you can kind of control the tip on the brush as well, make sure you've not got too much on in one go. Chance to start fixing any little mistakes from the previous stage. Of course, I'm using moot green, and the first step here is reapplying all the base paints, the same base colours, which will start building up the brightness again. I'm not wanting to go over everything. I am trying to leave the shade in places where it should be. And I'll also not put on too much in one go. Probably better to go over it twice if I feel that it's not strong enough. Try and catch the fingers and the backs of the hand. Maybe just start hinting that there's a crease on the inside of the elbow there. There's nothing in the plastic to show that, but with the paint you can suggest it a bit. And then on the face, mainly across the bridge of the nose, I think. There, the nostrils, under the eye, the upper lip, across there, maybe a little bit across on the chin. Really like how that left eye, his left eye, has that scrunched up look. Really sells it that he's aiming, squinting his eye, or closing his left eye to aim with his right. And there we go. So I mean that's just one pass of that moot green there, but you can see it's starting to smooth it out. Kind of nicer finish on it. Same with the command. Maybe take a little bit longer with these ones. Such great expressions on these goblins. I think these are the well-known Kev Adams sculpts. You do need a pretty good brush if you've got one for this. Always amazes me how the sculptors are able to get this much character into such a small space, just with those hand tools and things. Okay, so that's a pass on that one. Okay, so two options with how to paint these. I can either carry on with the normal method, which is to address each colour in turn in stages, or I could just concentrate on the skin and get that finished as one pass now, which is how I think I'll have a go at it. The moot green, I'm going to start adding in some Skarsnik green as the lightening colour to that. Kind of a minimal change to the colour of this. The idea is for me anyway, to try and do things which aren't going to be massively noticeable. I think that's the key for me now. Kind of learn that over time, is I'm not trying to make a huge difference once I start doing the layers. If you try and do too much in one go, it looks clumsy and not as nice, not as smooth. The idea is just to try and hit the areas that I caught last time, but not covering everything up. A little bit there on the elbow, back of the wrist. Try and come down each of the fingers along the back of the hand. It's almost like trying to hit those tendons rather than going across a whole lot in one. Same with the right hand. And then the face again, across the nose. Just on the nostril a bit there. Under the eye, top of the lip. And that would be the first pass of that. Same with the command miniatures. We'll be adding more and more lighter tones to the knuckles at least. Always helps make it look like they're tightly gripping on the weapon or the bow. And it's a lot easier to paint in detail when I'm using the wet palette. Just the way you can get a proper fine tip on the brush using that. And often the paint looks a lot brighter than it will once it dries down. It tends to fade back a bit as it dries. When you put it on initially, it can look quite bright. So I'll just have to work through each of them in turn and get them up to this stage. Now just a case of adding more Scarsnick green to that mix with the moot green. Try to pick out more of the kind of high points, or the almost like the muscle groups, is it now? Kneecap, calf. The more subtle the better. I think that's the key. The good painters that I watch and that I like looking at, I think it's lots of layers, lots of thin layers. So we'll see how we do. Might not do as many as they would do, but try and catch the bicep there. I noticed that on the studio one, that there's a definite highlight right there. Also a kind of tendon down the wrist. Maybe the underside, top side, the elbow, tricep, down the back of the wrist, the forearm, and then try coming down the tendons on the fingers, the knuckles on the fingers, then a little bit there on the pad of the palm and the thumb, and then across the top of the thumb there, then the right arm, top and bottom. So this is my third layer in terms of building up this green. And the more subtle the change, the better. Paint that's mixed on the wet palette seems to work better. And then across the chin, or the jaw, a little bit on the cheek, top lip, nostril, bridge of the nose, maybe a little bit on the eyebrow area, that cheek there, rest of the nose, and lastly on the lip. Yeah, there's no hiding place from this stage. It's the longest one, but I think you get the most from it in terms of the results. This is where hopefully I'll get the brightness in, a bit more definition, that upper lip here, maybe just start putting that in as vertical little strokes there, which may or may not come up on the camera. You don't have to do the whole nose, you can start picking out raised areas. The cheek there, over the eyes. It's all just creating nice contrast, isn't it? those eyes are going to start standing out more, especially when I add some red to them. But I think the hard work's done on the eyes in terms of worrying about it, getting it in the right place, making a mess. All that's handled now. All I need to worry about is just dotting in a nice bright red to them. I think overall it's a nice, this colour combo with the Skarsnik green on the moot green. I do think it makes for a good green skin, a good goblin skin. Start indicating fingernails. Work on that later. Yeah, I've added more Skarsnik green to that mix on the palette. Again, not a huge amount of difference between the different passes, but there is a noticeable difference when they're all combined. So that forearm there on the underside, the bicep. Just try to pick up on the areas where I've already gotten some highlights. I think it's easier on the more pronounced features of the metal miniatures. But you really start to see the expressions coming out. And I am trying now at this stage to not go over the edge too much. A little bit of Flashgit's yellow added to the Skarsnik green, and with plenty of water mixed in with it. Just looking to add a little hint of yellow to the skin. If it's thin enough, it will just, as it dries, it will disappear. It will be so obvious. Just here and there. A little bit of variation in the tone. Just moving it towards a hint of yellow. Nothing necessary about that. Yeah, as it dries it fades back a bit. It's not too strong. Thought I would move on to the red now. The Mephiston red. Just a case of going back over the red areas. Start trying to make that look brighter around the sides of the quiver. Maybe a few of the arrowheads, the flights on the arrows. But I'm likely to try and dry brush some brighter red onto that, because there is a bit of texture there that might catch if I dry brush the colour on. And then even in the eye area, just to start brightening that up. The metal ones also got their red shoes, and then this guy's sword, or whatever it is, blends up from red to a bright orange, and then any other little red details. I think now would be a good time to dry brush a couple of these metal parts before I get too carried away with anything else. So I was liable to be a bit messy doing this, and earlier it's done, the better, I think. I really like the method of dry brushing on top of that grey base. Quite old school way to do it. May do some just with the normal brush also, but it's a bit more fiddly to get to. Really want to avoid the skin. It's okay going the hood on the wooden pole. And down at the bottom, there's a little bit of metal there. And the standard bearer's sword. And then up on the banner pole. Now obviously I need to brighten up this red now. The Mephiston red's always quite dull, especially when it dries. Looks quite bright as you're adding it, but the next stage with this is Evil Sun's Scarlet, which is a really nice bright red. Pretty much over all of that Mephiston red, all the red areas. And it's reasonably thin on the palette, so a couple of coats of this one. But that should make a big difference. You can kind of see it there between the two ends of the bow. And then on the various sides of the quiver, and then the arrowheads. And then maybe just to try and catch some of that raised detail on the flights. I keep calling them arrowheads, I think. On the flights. Just drag the brush across that. A bit like Josh at Crown of Command. I've heard him mention doing a wet brush opposed to a dry brush. It's just enough to catch the detail, I think. And then the red shoes. I suppose this emblem would be the trickiest bit. And I've also got to remember to pick out the eyes again. So back onto the red with Wild Rider Red. That's mixed in with the Evil Sun's Scarlet. My aim now is to try and get some highlights around the tops of the bows, or the upper ends of the two sides of the bow, the two ends. Very tricky doing this because the actual bow itself, it's pretty plain, it's just a round, long shape. It's not like the skin where you've got little features and muscle groups and things to paint with. I'm almost through all 16 of them. But this is where it starts slowing down. The process at this moment has got much slower. I think you've got to try and see it as a marathon rather than a sprint. And I'm just fitting in some painting when I can manage at the moment. But it's amazing how, if you do that, just bits here and there, when you've got spare time, you can slowly make a difference. And then we've got the quiver to do. Just looking to get a swipe of the lighter red on the upper half, down the edges, and then on the flights of the arrows, and then a bit of this on the eye as well. Really starts standing out, which is good. And then before I put the miniature down, just go back and add a bit more. I've added some Fire Dragon Bright now into the Wild Rider Red. Mainly looking to just get around the top areas here as a band, I think. And then maybe just a bit of a line down the front. It's going to start creating that fiery highlight. And then it can go for the quiver. A bit on the flights. And then again, back to the bow for a second pass. And then the same on the command, just looking to add pretty much a final little highlight on some of these red bits. The sword's going to be a different case, there's going to be more of a blend through to yellow for that, going by the example in the book. But with thin paint, it should blend okay. And then the little serrated edge, both sides. Decided to come back in with just the straight Fire Dragon Bright now. That nice bright orange colour, just to go around the top end on each half of the bow. The reason I'm doing this is that these particular cards here, the photos show pretty bright yellow almost around the top there. It's a really fine line, but it is there. So I thought I might just do a bit more, and maybe a thin line down the front. If anything doesn't work out or looks a bit too much or too much of a step in the shading, you can just go back with some of the Evil Suns thinned down a lot and glaze over some of the transitions just to smooth it out a bit. If anything's too glaring or too harsh. And it does make the red pop, having that. It does make a difference. You can then do a bit of an edge highlight on the red quiver, and then a few spots here and there on the flights. Yes, it doesn't take too much extra work to do that. Finish off the quivers now, or at least reapply the first coat, the ratskin flash. Maybe do an edge highlight as well. I feel like I'm getting there now with these. There's less and less tasks to do. There's still the main one, which is the cloak and the hood to do. Just a case of churning through them. Yeah, I'll just use some Beastigore flesh. Do a little bit of a highlight. Finish off the arrows with a bit of a highlight. Some flayed one flesh on that. Just so there's something on there. Right, now looking at doing the belt and the strap. Getting a bit intricate now. The trickiness is that in the studio examples, you can see there's quite a lot of highlighting achieved on there. It's really impressive. Not sure I'm going to get to that, but I'll do what I can with it. I think you've just got to choose how much you think you can do and go with that. That at least should prep it for taking a more of a brighter highlight next. Yeah, on top of the scrag brown, now going in with some Deathclaw brown. tricky doing the belt. It's a surprising amount of work in these little Goblin Archers. And you can say that about almost any miniature. Doesn't really seem to matter how small they are. Now some Tau light ochre for highlighting on the belts. Get quite fiddly now. I think this is really the last step before I go into the black, which hoping is straightforward. Yeah, I think that would do it for the belts. Right, so onto the cloaks and highlighting this black or off black colour, which I fancy is going to be the trickiest stage. The problem's going to be knowing where to stop in terms of highlighting it, and not simply just painting all over the black that is there. Now, that's easy to fix. If I go too far with the highlighting, I can easily fix it. And I may do that anyway with a wash, perhaps a null oil wash, something like that. But what I'm using is just back to the original Incubi Darkness, which is very much thinned on the wet palette, and I'm just going to try and paint over the raised edges where I can. I think because I used Incubi Darkness at the start, that it blends in not too bad, especially thinned. It's going to go on okay. Don't be too dramatic a change. I'm just trying to prevent myself from painting over the whole lot. But there's some spots where you kind of just have to. On the hood, I think just a little bit around the bottom edge and around the face. And I will keep adding some water to this mix to keep it thin. And I think for the hood, I'm just going to work up the way with the brush strokes. And I'm kind of doing my own thing here. The examples and the photography of the originals are pretty much just thin little highlights here and there, rather than what I'm doing. I quite like the idea of having the peaks and the pointy bits and things blending up to quite a bright blue. Little peak there on the cap. The hood can have a reasonably bright highlight, which I think looks alright. A bit like on the example miniature, which I think works okay. If I can get something near that, I'll be happy enough. So after going back over the clothing again with the Incubi Darkness, I've now got Sotek Green to do a further highlight. And the idea for me is to try and catch all the raised areas in some way. And the paint needs to be thin enough so as not to be too prominent as it dries. But I'm not sure if this is quite how I was hoping it to be. I feel like it's too much. And I've already painted over half of them up to this stage. And it's too much of a time investment to stop. I'm kind of too far in with it now. I'm just going to have to see it through and hope that I like the end result. The problem I'm having is that compared to the previous Goblin where I tried this scheme, these guys have got kind of softer detail, an older plastic miniature, and the peak on the cap or the hood is being particularly tricky to deal with because it's kind of rounded and it's not got that definite shape. It's kind of larger piece and it's not so easy. I think, or at least I'm hoping, to be able to pull it back, because I do want the cloaks to still give the impression of being dark, the clothing being dark, but if this highlight just gets out of hand and becomes too bright, I'm going to have to knock it back, and I think that'll work. I hope it'll work. I find this stage often happens when I'm painting miniatures, where you feel like you're starting to lose the paint job a bit. So I'm just going to hope that if I keep going with it, just do what I was planning to do, it should work out. I mean, it's not that I'm not following any guide on this, it's just basing it on the originals, but of course they weren't painted with this obvious blue highlight. They were done with grey, or a bit of grey. I definitely find black to be one of the toughest colours to deal with for highlighting. And around the cap, a bit of an edge highlight for a start, and the bottom edge of it. It's just that a lot of the highlights you see on the Night Goblins, especially with the dark or black clothing, tends to be just a light colour drawn in places to indicate maybe a fold in the cloth, or it's kind of artificially there. There isn't actually a ridge or anything on the plastic. It's just, someone will just come in and draw a highlight, and I find that kind of stuff tricky to do. But up on the tip of the hood, I'm just thinking that with the paint quite thinned, I'm going to be quite generous with it. The whole peak done. And I'm not sure what the material is, or the justification for this effect. I'm not sure what this says about the material, or what it is, or what I'm trying to achieve with it. It's more just I want to include some sort of light blue highlight here. And then what I've been doing is immediately going back over all the areas where I've put this highlight and just doing a bit more to strengthen it up. You often find when painting things like these shoes, and they're very simple, there's not much. They're very simple, there's not much detail in them, they're relatively smooth. So you're just drawing in a couple of slashes over it with a highlight. I find that difficult to do, deciding exactly where to put them or how they should look. This is a lengthy stage, this one. I'm finding it to be pretty difficult. That might just be due to not knowing exactly how it's going to come out. Yeah, I think just as a little bit of justification for the blue that I'm using in these dark cloaks, this the cover box art for Idol of Gork by David Gallagher. You can see there's definitely blue getting used as a highlight for the Night Goblins there. So maybe it does make sense to use that. But before toning it down, I've got to go a bit further with the highlights, so I'm going to use this Temple Guard blue for a final pass. So just a case of adding some of this on top of the highlights that are already there, and then hoping that it's going to work. It'll be an experiment at least. See these boots that they're wearing are quite rounded and they don't have that sharpness where you can highlight them easily. The previous one that I'd done there, you can see how that's easier to highlight. There's more definition in it, it's a sharper shape. So I'm just contending with the softer or more rounded overall shape of this miniature. And even on the peak again, just going to rather clumsily add some of the Temple Guard blue up on there. And yeah, that will look overly extreme right now. So what's the plan to rescue these? It's going to be a wash with Drakenhof Nightshade. My hope is that if I go over most of these areas where I've been doing this very clumsy looking highlight, my hope is that it's going to magically bring it all back together and calm it down a bit, because I think it's too strong. If that works, I've got a repeatable process for doing more of these. So yeah, I'm just going to put this on top of the clothing and see how it looks. I suppose just like a glaze, but being careful not to go onto any of the other surfaces. Don't want to spoil anything I've done that I am happy with. I can always get the biostrip 20 out, start again. No, I won't be doing that. I think the last stage there was the most tedious of the lot so far. I think maybe just because I wasn't sure if it was going to work out. Kind of feel like you're spoiling them in some way. And then on the hood, can I make the hood look better? Okay, I'll let that one dry and see how it looks. Little addition of a thumbnail, or an indication of a thumbnail. What I do is just get some shade, wash, whatever, onto the brush, and then just put in a little blob where the nail would be. Just subtle effect. But I tend to add those now where I didn't before. Right, that's going to do me for these guys. I suppose you've got to watch how long you spend on rank and file miniatures. There's a lot of them to paint. I've been working on these for the whole of this month, and I think they're okay. They'll do. I go on to the basing now, which will be just the same as how I've shown other fantasy miniatures getting based. Well, that's the rank and file Night Goblin Archers done, at least this first batch. Got another batch to do, of course. I'm overall happy enough, I think. If I were to come back and do anything else, it would maybe be adjust the peaks on those caps. But as I said, I think you've got to draw the line somewhere, especially with these quite cheap rank and file miniatures. I think they'll be fine for what they are, and I'm glad I've recorded it because I can at least go back and follow the process again for when I come back to the other ones. I'm going to break out the command group into a separate video. There's a number of jobs to do with these. We've got the checkers to do, this guy's sword, some other details on there. I'll do a banner for the standard bearer, the yellows to do. He's got checkers to get. The musician, some sort of skull symbol on there, and again he's got the checkers and things to worry about, so there's plenty of work left in those. Overall, hopefully the video is of some use to someone who may be tackling their own plastic Night Goblin Archers. It's a lot of work. I'm surprised how much work it is. I was hoping that they would be quicker for me or a bit easier, but in the end it's just like any other miniature actually. It doesn't seem to matter how big they are. I suppose that's miniature painting. In any case, thanks very much for watching the video.